It's an age-old argument that every avid roller coaster enthusiast has a particular and usually fervent opinion. Which Kings Island roller coaster had the most significant impact on the amusement and theme park industry? Is it the Racer or is it the Beast? Alongside Ryan Sir, I'm Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics. Tower Topics is a podcast by Kings Island fans for Kings Island fans because that's who we are and that's who we care about. So, Ryan, Racer or the Beast?
I would say I've put a lot of thought into this because this is a debate. If we're talking about industry wide, I would say the racer because the racer ushered in the second golden age of roller coaster, especially wooden roller coasters.
Mhm.
Um, and the beast, I would say, probably had a more of an impact on the park because it put Kings Island on the map and made it, a worldwide phenomenon. What are your thoughts? And then we'll break down some of our each of our individual thoughts.
Well, I mean, they're both legendary, iconic wooden roller coasters. At the time the Racer went in, parks weren't building roller coasters anymore. They'd kind of moved away from that, especially wooden roller coasters. So when Kings Island said they were going to build the Racer, there was a lot of people throughout the industry questioning that. I remember Six Flags being a park that wondered what they were thinking. They were talking to Gary Walks and his father Ralph Walks and the Tap Broadcasting Company saying, why would you put in a roller coaster, especially a wooden one. So I think the popularity of it right off the bat, the Racer, just really took the industry by storm. And then, within the next few years, the wooden coaster building boom began, and you started to see all these other parks. Six Flags Park started building wooden roller coasters, and other chains started building wooden roller coasters, and that led to the Beast in 1979. So I always wonder, if they hadn't built the Racer, I mean, somebody, would have put in a wooden roller coaster, but that one was just special, and it was a great ride. You know, really looked great visually. You know, taking photographs, from the Eiffel Tower, from the midways. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful coasters, especially now that it's painted red, white, and blue again, that's out there. So to me, I always wondered what would have become of the wooden roller coaster had it not been for the Racer.
Yeah, I mean that's true, and a lot of people refute this because, for example, Blue Streak at Cedar Point was built in the late '60s,
64, 1964, yeah.
1964. So it was within the realm of when the racer was built. So they were building wooden coasters, just not necessarily. It wasn't a thing anymore. It was.
No, no, it hadn't been. And, when you look at it, you can say the Racer started at Renaissance. But the Beast kind of kicked off the coaster wars between parks because now you had this record breaker. You mentioned the word putting it on the map.
Mhm.
People were coming from all over the world specifically to ride it. And now you started seeing other parks putting in these record breaking roller coasters. Not long after the Beast, you had Six Flags Great America in Gurnee, Illinois. They put in the Eagle, a racing coaster, gigantic in size. So everybody was trying to compete with Kings Island and the Beast right after that. So I think in terms of igniting the coaster building wars, no question, it was the Beast.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was very impactful on Kings Island itself. But going back to the racer, you said that parks generally weren't building wooden coasters. Was it more like were flat rides more popular, or were other track? I know that was kind of like.
Flat rides, dark rides, those were the things that you were seeing in the late '60s. You were seeing more of that being built.
Do you think that it's just that they built wooden coasters, by the mouthful, in the early part of the 20th century, so people were just over them, or do you think there's another reason why they simply weren't building wooden coasters at that point?
Well, I think there's a lot of factors that would be involved. Some of it would be, when you look at some of the parks that were around back then in the '60s, just the available real estate to build a wooden roller coaster. They were high cost, high maintenance to have a wooden roller coaster. So I think a lot of those factors, played into it that you could, put 4 or 5 rides in, flat rides, um, at a fraction of the price that what it would cost to build and maintain a wooden roller coaster. So those things had to have factored into that. Um, but a lot of them, that were out there in the 20s and 30s, they were wild rides. They were extremely popular. But you had hundreds of them that just got destroyed. And as you move toward the early 60s, you did see Blue Streak and a couple other ones, get built. But that wasn't what it was thought was drawing guests to your park at that point in time.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that we can agree the elephant in the room is the fact that, in the 1950s, Disneyland opened. Disneyland did have some coasters. It didn't have any wooden coasters. It had, a couple steel coasters.
Yeah, and you did see some steel coasters. A lot of those corkscrew type rides were were still going in. So it wasn't like there weren't any roller coasters. You just weren't seeing those wooden coasters, and especially any of the size of the racer. Now, think about this: when the racer opened, it's the tallest, longest, fastest. That's what it was built when it opened. And you look at it now, and just look at the size of the beast. It's taller, it's a lot longer, it's faster. A lot of other wooden roller coasters have surpassed the racer. Um, but at the time, that was the biggest. But now you go down the Midway, and it's being dwarfed by Orion and some other rides that had when the Vortex was there. So it doesn't look as massive as it once did.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, nowadays it's a mid card. It's when you're tall enough you can ride that. But at the time, I remember always. I mean, obviously, I grew up in a day and age where we had the Beast and the Vortex and all that stuff. But I remember accounts of like when I rode that for the first time, the two trains split and went the opposite direction. That freaked me out, and it's like. It's funny how comparative it is, and it's going to be crazy where it is, and 50 years from now, 51 years from now.
Yeah, and the racer had a lot of significant moments, in the 70s and the 80s. The Cincinnati Kids episode of the Brady Bunch, was featured on that. The year before in 72 when the park opened, the Partridge Family, there's clips of the Partridge Family riding the racer. So it became known nationally because of those two TV shows that everybody knew what Kings Island was, but they also knew about the racer because of those 2 episodes. So it gained a little notoriety off of that. Then you had, different record-breaking attempts on the racer. I was part of that in the 80s. So it really had a lot of things that got a lot of attention in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that we've discussed probably at length, what the impact of the racer was, and that's pretty well accepted and documented. Let's talk about the impact that the Beast had on the industry. Now, you kind of touched on the fact that other parks started doing the record breakers and stuff. Is it? I know that the racer was a record breaker, but the Beast was built to be a record breaker.
Well, yeah, but it wasn't, billed as in that same kind of respect. It just, it was just kind of a matter of fact. It's the tallest, the longest. There wasn't any kind of real competition at that time. By the time the Beast was built, yeah, there was starting to be some competition out there, and that one just shattered everything. You know, the length of the ride, more than twice as really any other wooden roller coasters out there. The speed of the coaster, uh, the first drop, how deep that was at 135 feet. It only stood 110 feet, so it wasn't as dominant that way, but the drop, was significant. Nothing like that. The second lift hill, so it really became almost like two coasters in one in a lot of ways. There was just a lot about it that had not been done before. Um, Being in the woods, like it is, where you really couldn't see what you were about to experience. I think that played a lot into the mystique about the beast. Was you had to ride it to see what you're getting into. The racer, you could watch it from the Eiffel Tower, you could walk down the Midway, go to a lot of other parks, you can see their coasters. So I think that played a lot into the mystique of the beast. And then it really was two different rides in one. There was the daytime experience, and then at night, just a totally different animal. And I think that really helped, put that ride near the top or at the top of a lot of coaster enthusiast list.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Now, would you buy into the argument that the beast, as far as its contribution to the industry, that it was kind of a proof of concept that the record breaking stuff is marketable and that people will travel to ride those things, since it was really one of the first to kind of take that route as far as this is the longest, this is the tallest, this is the fastest, and so on. I mean, would you agree with that? Let's start with that.
Yeah, I think that it became part of a marketing plan. Like, what can we do that's a record breaker that's going to grab attention? Because it's not always, the statistics people can gloss over a little bit. We're talking about heights or speeds, but to use those words, record breaking height, record breaking speed, record breaking, whatever it might be on the ride. So I think that those are the things that became important as parks were looking to put in new attractions. Now it became a competition.
Mhm.
How can we one up what this other park that we compete against just did? So it became a lot about that. And then as you got deeper into that, you found a lot of these rides that they were just going for records. They weren't, maybe they weren't the best ride experiences, and they didn't have a long shelf life to them. And now it's kind of back to, let's just give our guest a great ride, more so than the record. If you do a record, great, but they're trying to find all these different ways now to call something a record. You're not seeing, as much for the tallest. You're not seeing as much for, the longest, those types of things, but you're seeing other records for more of an innovation type of a thing that they're putting into it now.
Yeah, and records based off geography, like, the tallest roller coaster in the northeast of this state, stuff like that. But, I mean, because 'cause I'm trying to think of, like, the impact that, the Beast had on the industry as a whole, and I'm wondering if
Well, I think what you saw, yeah, like you talked about putting on the map. I mean, people coming from all over. Now, Kings Island had been a regional park. Most parks were regional,
Mhm.
in the country, and you had your, you know, 3, 4 states around you that you would draw from. But once the Beast went in and people were coming not just from the United States, but they were coming from, Canada, they were coming from Switzerland, they were coming from Japan, they were coming from Russia, they were coming from everywhere just to ride that ride. And you saw the impact it had, on attendance, and other parks want a piece of that. So what can we do to get somebody to come to our park from all these other places around the world? And it just kind of, the Beast had that kind of impact.
Yeah, so, and this is just popping into my head now, I never really thought about it from this angle, but I wonder if there was no Beast, if there would have been a Millennium Force, or a Kingda Ka, or a Vortex, or Son of Beast, or any of the rides that came birthed out of, "Let's make it the tallest, let's make it the fastest," stuff like that. I wonder if, like, the record stuff would have been s
Well, something was still going to be out there. I think, you wouldn't have seen as much, you know, as you did, back in the early 80s. You wouldn't have seen those kind, as quickly as it happened like that, where people, the parks were trying to top each other. But I think, ultimately someone would have still, built that first 200-foot tall coaster. Somebody would have built the first 250, the first 300-foot, and so on. So I think it still would have happened. It just might not have happened as quickly.
Yeah, and you could also make the argument about the racer. Parks just weren't building wooden coasters, but you did concede that, well, people were building it. But the fact of the matter is, the racer was big, impactful, popular, and it proved a point. And I think that you can make the same argument for the Beast. The Beast was a record breaker. It was marketed as a record breaker, and it was super popular. So I think that the
And it worked. That's the other
right.
piece of this. It worked. That's if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter, what records it holds. It's going to have a short shelf life, and you're not going to have that word of mouth about the coaster. So I think that was an important thing for the Beast, is that it was as advertised. It lived up to the hype.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And but I'm thinking like, yeah, I mean, you're right. Somebody would have built a 200-foot coaster or whatever. But I'm thinking in this timeline, in this reality, you can directly trace the family tree of, Magnum and all these rides that were built as record breakers back to the Beast, because the Beast in '79 that was the proof of concept that the longest, the tallest, stuff like that is marketable. It is
Yeah, and
popular,
you
and
saw
it
the Beast. Yeah, if you're in another park, you saw the Beast in all these national shows year after year in the 80s. You saw him on Entertainment Tonight. You saw the Beast on Good Morning America. You saw the Beast in People Magazine. It was always being featured. So, the park saw that, and we got to get it. We need a piece of the action here. We got to build our own record breaking kind of ride. So, yeah, it had that kind of impact.
Yeah, I agree, and, it's funny because the Beast had so many records that it's had so many records broken, but it is still the longest wooden coaster.
And that comes down to, two things: the amount of space that it would take to build something like that. A lot of parks don't have that kind of space.
Mhm.
And the other thing is the cost it would take
Well,
to
yeah, and I completely
paint it. So,
agree, but I
uh,
also think that, Kings Island also every year inherits the beast too, where it's if you went to a different park and you're like, I want to build a 7,359 feet plus five or whatever it is now, wooden coaster, it's thinking, well, we got to hire five more carpenters, but Kings Island's had that, not really that problem because it's baked into what Kings Island is, but um, Kings Island's had that situation for decades now, so it's not a big thought. But I think that's one of the things that kind of pushes parks away from it, where it's like
yeah.
you're not hiring
But,
one more
it's
person.
35 acres, that ride
Oh yeah,
that it covers, 35 acres. So, not many parks, if you built that on 35 acres, there's not gonna be a lot of park left for anything else with some of the parks that are out there around the country. So, that's another thing. Kings Islanders happen to have the available land to build something, and not everyone has that opportunity. They're kind of landlocked.
yeah, yeah. They are very lucky in that regard. It seems like that they did it right as far as buying them. Now, with that being said, we're going to get into the whole thing of the origins of the park in another episode, but they are blessed with the land. Thank you from recommendation from Mr. Walt Disney himself. But yeah, so the Beast, it's wait, but let's before we go anywhere, the Beast, so it was still marketable for the past several decades as the longest wooden coaster. I mentioned that it had several records, but all of them were broken. But it's still the world's longest wooden coaster. And then it kind of was the gift that kept on giving because it broke its own record. Brief us on that as well as the campaign you put behind that, as far as
Well,
problem.
yeah, I mean, there was extensive track work that happened a couple seasons ago with it. Gravity Group came out and reprofiled a little bit, going through the first drop and around the turn. And in doing that work, it added a couple more feet of length of track, just the way it got reprofiled. So instead of 7,349 feet, now it became 7,351 feet. Now, because it had that record forever, and um, you know everything about the beast, you can Google it. They all had the exact number of 7,349 feet. So the fact it was two feet added, I think that was worth mentioning, that it broke its own record, and it was kind of a way to um, kind of not reintroduce the beast, but to kind of segue into the track work that had been done. Because every year there's some track work and that goes on with wooden coasters, sometimes more extensive than others. But it was a lot of extensive track work that took place. But it was a way to kind of segue into that it broke its own record, and here's how. So it was kind of a good way to tell that story about the track work that took place that winter.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was thinking about like the um the 3 big times that since I've been involved with Kings Island, so around 2002, 2003, that we've really been had by the park, by them announcing something that's like, it's true, but it's not, like, completely like what you think. That is one of the top 3 as far as the Beast breaking its record. It's like, "Oh, by 2 feet," but that's still kinda cool, So I think that's cool.
Yeah, and
The
you never saw a coaster increase its length like that and breaking its own record, and it was there's going to be some that are going to say, wow, it's just 2 feet, but it's significant because it had the record at 7,349 feet. So it made sense to tie that into the story of the track work.
Yeah, so that's one of the interesting, like, 4th dimensional thought kinda stuff.
Yeah. Now, if you had that with another coaster that wasn't the record breaker, you're not going to talk about adding another couple feet or any, it doesn't matter if it's
Right.
2 more feet long or two
Right, right,
feet
but but
shorter.
but I'm saying
Doesn't matter at that
specifically
point.
that the message was communicating out that it broke its own record. So
Hmm.
that one was a good one. The one we discussed in another episode where two original things from the park were going to be removed. Ended up being the parking tolls. Spoiler alert. That was a good one because it was true, but it also wasn't what you're thinking because everyone was thinking the racer, you
You
know.
weren't expecting
And then the other
exactly
thing
that.
was,
So, yeah, but I thought, I just thought it was a nice, way to introduce the track work because you can always say we had track work, but it doesn't catch your attention. But when you say you broke your own record by having the track work, then it becomes it's interesting. People want to read about
yeah,
it.
exactly. The other one, by the way, was 2003 when this was Paramount. They announced that Labor Day or whenever the water park closed would be that what was it at the time? Soak City will be closing forever on Labor Day or whatever. So people were freaking out thinking they were closing the water park.
Waterworks,
Yep, Waterworks
yeah,
was closing and it
Waterworks.
became Crocodile Dundee's Boomerang Bay, which became Soak City.
Yeah, you got to have fun like that, when you're a park and something's getting renamed, or you're adding something to it. It's always a fun way to engage your guest, your biggest fans about what's happening.
Yeah, I agree. But those are the three. But I think the Beast one was one of the best because that was making absolutely something from
Hmm.
nothing, but it wasn't like it didn't hold water. It was true. It did break its own record. It is longer. But at the same time, if that's a headline, somebody reads it and they're like, "Oh, they're doing work on the Beast. That was terrible. Let's try that again." And it, for both the Beast and the Racer, the Gravity Group's new stuff was
It breathed
fantastic.
new life into both
Sure.
coasters.
Yeah. It made a world of difference, and they're both. I mean, I think that the impact is probably bigger on the. It's hard to say. Recently, I would say that the Racer probably had a bigger impact because that went from torturous to like this is really fun, while the Beast like wasn't all bad. It had bad sections, which got much better, but just from length alone, it was definitely impactful, shall we say, on the experience in a very,
Yeah.
very positive way.
Now, Ryan, you and I have both kind of debated a little bit which coaster we thought maybe had the biggest impact on the industry. But let's hear what our listeners think. So, either if you're watching the video, leave a comment of whether the Racer or the Beast you think had the biggest impact, or if you're following us on social media, go to our Twitter and leave a comment there.
Yeah, our Twitter/X is tower_topics. All right, so Beast versus Racer, the debate will never end. I'm Ryan Sir, along with Don Helbig, and this is Tower Topics.